Black single mom's daughter is dying. Korean Mafia boss offers a transplant for a price. The call comes at 3:47 a.m. Naledi knows that time will stay with her forever. 3:47 a.m. is the moment the hospital stops pretending there's hope and starts making phone calls. It's the hour when hope dies and administrative necessity takes over. It's the moment when a doctor decides that the parents need to be told the truth, and he's too tired to soften it with more bedside manner than honesty allows. Mrs. Dlamini, your daughter's kidney function has dropped to 8%, the voice says. It's Dr. Patterson, and he sounds smaller at this hour. More honest. You need to come now. We need to discuss end-of-life care. End of life. Those 3 words contain the entire universe collapsing. They contain every hope she's ever had, every dream she's ever whispered to Zara in the dark of their small apartment, every promise she's made to herself that she would protect her daughter from this exact moment. And they're erasing all of it with the clinical precision of a doctor who's delivered this message 100 times before. Naledi sits up in bed so quickly that her head spins. The phone trembles in her hand. For a moment she can't breathe. The darkness of her bedroom presses in on her like a physical thing. Suffocating, absolute. How long? She whispers. Her voice doesn't sound like her own. Sounds like a woman drowning. Without intervention? 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if we're lucky with her body's response to medication. But realistically, Mrs. Dlamini, we're looking at a fortnight before her organs begin to shut down completely. Naledi closes her eyes. 14 days. 14 nights. She's had 6 months to prepare for this. 6 months since Zara's diagnosis. 6 months of dialysis 3 times a week. 6 months of watching her daughter's energy drain away like water from a cracked cup. But knowing it's coming and having the final countdown delivered at 3:47 a.m. are 2 completely different things. Her only child. The person she's sacrificed everything for. The reason she works 3 jobs. The reason she's exhausted down to the marrow of her bones. The reason she gets up every morning even when the weight of living feels too heavy to carry. Zara is 7 years old. She has a spelling test on Monday. She drew a picture of a giraffe yesterday and asked Naledi if they could go to a wildlife sanctuary someday so she could see them in real life. She wants to be a veterinarian. She's supposed to have a life. A full life. A life where she falls in love and gets heartbroken and falls in love again. A life where she saves animals like she dreams about. A life where she's 90 years old and surrounded by grandchildren, and still remembers how her mother loved her. I'll come now, Naledi says. She's already moving, already reaching for the jeans draped over her chair, already pulling them on with shaking hands. I'll be there in 30 minutes. She hangs up and sits in the darkness of her tiny apartment, listening to the city breathe outside her window. Johannesburg doesn't sleep. It just gets quieter. The traffic reduced to the occasional late-night taxi or the distant wail of a siren. She has 2 weeks to perform a miracle. 2 weeks to save her daughter's life. 2 weeks to do the impossible or watch her child die. She has no money. She has $3,000 in savings. Money she's been stockpiling for 3 years, cutting back on food, wearing the same clothes, taking the longest bus routes to save money. It's not enough. A kidney transplant costs $75,000 minimum. The medications to keep the new kidney functioning will cost $10,000 a year for the rest of Zara's life. She doesn't have that. She will never have that. No bank will loan it to her. No charity will cover it. She is, by every measure that matters, completely and utterly alone. Except, there is one person. A man whose name she's only said once in a whisper, to her mother when she was asking if Naledi was safe. A man she's been avoiding for 3 months. A man she promised herself she'd never ask for anything again, no matter how desperate things became. Park Min-jun. She pulls out her phone. Her hands shake as she types the message. I need help. Zara's dying. Please. She stares at the words. She deletes them. She types them again. She deletes them again. She types. Can we talk? That's safer. That's less desperate. That's. Her phone rings before she can hit send. Where are you? His voice is immediate, awake, focused. There's no grogginess, no confusion. He sounds like he was waiting for her call. How did you? Naledi starts. I told you, he says. I have people watching everything. I got the alert when you received the hospital call. I've been waiting for you to reach out. Of course. Of course he's been monitoring her. Of course this man, who she met 3 months ago at the private home where she works cleaning, who gave her a business card with his private number, who told her that if she ever needed anything at all she should call, has been watching her, tracking her, waiting. My daughter, she says. She's dying. They said 2 weeks, maybe 3. I don't have money for a transplant. I don't have options. I don't. Her voice breaks. I don't know what to do. There's a pause. Just a breath. Then, pack a bag. Only essentials. You and your daughter. We're leaving Johannesburg tonight. I can't just, my mother, she's watching Zara right now in school and I'll handle the details, he says. You pack. 20 minutes. I'm picking you up. Who is this? She asks, though she knows. She knows exactly who this is. Someone who knows what it's like to lose a child, he says quietly. And there's something in his voice, a rawness, a depth of pain that makes her believe him. And who refuses to let it happen again. The line goes dead. If you're a parent, if you've ever loved someone so much you'd burn the world down for them, tell us right now in the comments. Where are you watching from? Your country? Your city? Let Naledi know she's not alone right now. And if you understand that sometimes saving someone you love means making deals with people you don't fully understand, hit subscribe now bell, because the next scene will change everything about what you believe is possible. To understand what Naledi agrees to in the next hours, you need to understand who she is. You need to understand what she's already sacrificed. She was born in Soweto, in a house with no electricity and water that came from a shared tap 3 blocks away. Her mother, Montamba Futhi, was a nurse, a contradiction of poverty and pride. She made $400 a month and spent it on Naledi's education, which meant choosing between electricity and school fees, and always choosing school fees. Naledi's father was a name her mother wouldn't speak, a man Naledi never met. All she knew was that he was Kosa, that he was married to someone else, that he gave her mother money once and then disappeared. She spent her childhood looking at other children's fathers at school assemblies and wondering what hers looked like, where he was, whether he ever thought about her. By the time she was 18, Naledi had a scholarship to university, engineering, a way out of Soweto, a way to become someone important. Then she met Thabo. He was beautiful in the way that young men sometimes are, confident and charming and absolutely catastrophically selfish. He was a student at Wits studying business, talking about the empire he'd built. She was naive enough to believe that she was going to be part of that empire, that his love was a promise. When she got pregnant at 20, she thought he would step up. She thought love meant responsibility. She was profoundly wrong. Get an abortion, he said when she told him. I can't have a child right now. My career. She didn't get an abortion. She dropped out of university. She moved back in with her mother. She worked in a hospital cleaning rooms while pregnant, pushing a mop with her swollen belly, wondering how she'd become exactly what she swore she wouldn't be. A single mother in a township, her dreams deferred indefinitely. Zara was born on a Tuesday in January. She was small and perfect, and Naledi loved her so immediately, so fiercely, that it frightened her. Because she understood in that moment that she would do anything for this child. Anything. She would sacrifice her future, her dreams, her dignity. She would work until her hands bled. She would go without food so her daughter could eat. She would become a ghost if it meant keeping her daughter alive. Thabo came to see Zara once. He held her with the awkwardness of a man uncomfortable with children, made a comment about how she had his eyes, and never came back. He paid no child support. He sent no messages on her birthday. He simply ceased to exist in their lives, becoming a story that Naledi would eventually tell her daughter about her father. That he was young, that he was scared, that it wasn't her fault he left. She raised Zara alone. She worked at Johannesburg Hospital from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. cleaning surgical suites and recovery rooms. Then she picked up Zara from her mother's house and brought her to her mother's apartment, where Montamba Futhi watched her while Naledi took an evening shift at a private house in Sandton, cleaning for wealthy people who looked through her as if she were furniture. 3 jobs. 7 days a week. No vacation. No sick days. No time for anything except keeping her daughter alive and educated and loved. When Zara got sick, Naledi thought her world would end. The diagnosis of IgA nephropathy came at the end of a normal Tuesday. Blood in Zara's urine. Swelling in her legs. The kidney damage was already at 60% by the time they caught it. How did this happen? Naledi asked the nephrologist, as if she could have prevented it. As if love and sacrifice were enough to stop a child's own immune system from turning on itself. Sometimes, the doctor said gently, the body just fails. It's not your fault. It's not anything you did. It's just biology being cruel. Dialysis became their new life. 3 times a week, 6 hours each time. Naledi would sit in the pediatric dialysis unit, watching her daughter's blood be filtered through machines, watching the color drain from her face, watching her get smaller and smaller. She took on a 4th job, weekend cleaning for Min-jun's house, a place so enormous it took 4 hours to clean, and paid 3 times what the other jobs paid. That's where she met him. Park Min-jun. Naledi had seen him twice at the house before he actually spoke to her. The first time was a Saturday morning. She was cleaning the master bedroom, a room larger than her entire apartment, when she heard a car pull into the driveway. She froze, as she always did when the family was home. It was easier to clean when nobody was watching, easier to pretend she was invisible. A man emerged from a black Mercedes. He was Korean, maybe early 40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. His face was sharp, aristocratic, the kind of face that gets used to being obeyed. But his eyes held something else, a darkness that had nothing to do with the color and everything to do with the weight he was carrying. He stood in the driveway for a long time, just looking at the house as if it meant something to him. Then he went inside. She didn't see him again that day. The second time was 2 weeks later. She was vacuuming the library, a room with floor-to-ceiling windows and thousands of books that she suspected nobody actually read, when she sensed him before she saw him. She turned, startled, and found him standing by the window, looking out at the gardens with the kind of exhaustion that can't be fixed by sleep. "Mrs. Lee says you're the best cleaner we've had in 5 years," he said without turning around. His English was perfect, accented but precise. Naledi froze. The family never spoke to her. She was designed to be invisible, to do her work and disappear like a ghost. "Thank you, sir," she said carefully. "How is your daughter?" he asked. The question was so unexpected, so impossibly kind, that Naledi's careful professional mask cracked slightly. "You know about my daughter?" she asked. "Mrs. Lee talks," he said, finally turning to face her. "She says you've taken 3 jobs in the past month, that you're always tired but never late, that you called in sick once in 5 years, when your daughter was in the hospital." Naledi's throat tightened. "She's sick. Very sick." He studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, a recognition perhaps of another person carrying an impossible weight. "What kind of sick?" he asked. She shouldn't have told him. Shouldn't have sat down on the library sofa while this strange man made her tea, and listened to her story about kidneys and dialysis, and the impossible mathematics of keeping her daughter alive. But something about his silence, the way he didn't offer platitudes or false hope, made her trust him with the truth. "The transplant list," she finished, her voice hollow. 3 months. Maybe less. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked a question that changed everything. "How much would you need to save her life?" Naledi has just met the man who's been watching her. She doesn't know it yet, but he's about to become the most important person in her life. Tell us in the comments. He'll save her or he'll destroy her. And add your country so she knows what the world predicts. And if you're starting to understand the sacrifice she's about to make, hit subscribe bell because the next scene is where everything changes. The private airstrip is somewhere outside Pretoria. Naledi doesn't ask questions as the black Mercedes winds through pre-dawn darkness toward a destination she can't identify. She's learned in her 34 years that sometimes not asking is a form of survival. Sometimes not knowing gives you plausible deniability. Sometimes ignorance is the only shield a person like her can afford. Zara sleeps in the back seat, her small body curled against the window, the stuffed elephant. She's named it Jumbo creatively, tucked under her arm. She doesn't understand why her mother pulled her from bed in the middle of the night, why they're in a car with a strange man, why everything smells like leather and expensive cologne instead of home. Naledi sits in the front passenger seat and tries not to look at Min-jun. Tries not to notice the way his hands are perfectly steady on the steering wheel. Tries not to observe the controlled power in his body, the way he moves like someone who's been trained to hurt people, who's comfortable with violence in a way that goes beyond simple physical strength. My daughter, Naledi says finally, her voice brittle in the silence. She has kidney disease. IgA nephropathy. It's an autoimmune condition where her own body attacks her kidneys, and there's no cure. She's been on dialysis for 6 months but… I know, Min-jun says quietly. I've known for 3 months. The words land like ice water. Naledi's blood goes cold. What do you mean, you know? She asks, though she already knows. She's piecing it together in real time. The way he looked at her during their brief conversations at the Santun house. The way he asked about her daughter. The intensity of his attention in a way that, in hindsight, was calculated rather than casual. I have people who watch people I'm interested in, he says. His voice is matter of fact, presented as information rather than confession. I watched you. I know everything about your daughter. Her medical history, her prognosis, her dialysis schedule. I know she draws pictures of animals and wants to save them. I know her teacher says she's gifted. I know that on Tuesday evenings, you stay late at the hospital after your shift because you can't afford not to. And you sit by her bed and tell her stories about South Africa's wildlife. Naledi's hands clench into fists. Why? Why would you do that? Because I recognize something in you, he says. He glances at her briefly, his dark eyes unreadable. A mother willing to sacrifice anything. Everything. I wanted to understand that. I needed to understand that. He pauses at a red light. Dawn is starting to break over Johannesburg, turning the sky shades of pink and gold that seem obscene against the conversation they're having. My wife was supposed to teach me that kind of love, he continues. She was pregnant. 7 months. She had stretch marks on her belly and morning sickness that lasted all day, and she would sit with her hand on her stomach and talk to the baby. She wanted to name our son Taejun. She had already decided. His voice doesn't change. It remains level, controlled. But Naledi hears the devastation beneath it. The way pain transforms into something that looks like calm if you have enough practice hiding it. They killed her, he says. A car accident, supposedly. But it wasn't an accident. My enemies targeted her because they wanted to hurt me. And I was too slow to protect her. Too arrogant to believe they'd actually do it. So I watched her die. And I watched my son die with her. And I learned a lesson about love, that it makes you weak. That the things you love are vulnerabilities. He drives. The city wakes up around them. Street vendors appear. Taxis fill with workers. Life continues as if the world hasn't just shifted on its axis for Naledi. For 8 years I told myself I would never love anyone again. I told myself that weakness had no place in my life. That I would build something powerful instead. A network, an operation. An empire built on fear rather than affection. He glances at Naledi again. And then I saw you. A woman cleaning a house, working 3 jobs, sacrificing everything for a child. And I realized that you hadn't become weak. You had become the strongest person I'd ever met. Because you loved despite the cost. You loved despite knowing that love could destroy you. So you started spying on me, Naledi says. It's not a question. Yes, he confirms. I had you followed. I monitored your phone. I learned everything about you and your daughter. And I waited. For what? Naledi whispers. For the moment when you would have no choice but to accept my help, he says. For the moment when you would be desperate enough that you couldn't refuse me. That moment is now. Naledi looks back at Zara, sleeping peacefully, unaware that the trajectory of her entire life is being rewritten in real time. She thinks about rage. She thinks about running. She thinks about screaming at this man who's been orchestrating her desperation. Instead, she asks, "Can you really save her? Is that even possible?" "Yes," he says simply. "I can get her a kidney. A perfect match. Within 48 hours. I have access to resources that don't exist in the official transplant system." Naledi's breath catches. A perfect match. 48 hours. It should feel like a miracle. Instead, it feels like a trap. "What's the cost?" she asks. She already knows the answer will be terrible. She already understands that nothing this man does comes without a price. But she asks anyway because she needs to hear him say it. She needs to understand exactly what she's about to give up. I don't want your money, he says. You don't have any. Then what? Naledi asks. Because nothing in this world is free. Everything has a cost. Every rescue comes with strings attached. Every miracle is paid for in something. 10 years, he says. I want you to work for me. I want you to be available whenever I need you. No questions. No refusals. Your life, your time, your loyalty. 10 years of your existence in exchange for your daughter's life. Naledi's stomach drops. What kind of work? The kind that doesn't have a job title, he says. The kind that requires discretion, intelligence, and a willingness to do things that aren't technically legal. But nothing violent. Nothing that will make you complicit in hurting anyone innocent. He glances at her. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm a criminal. You're right. I am. But I'm also the only person on earth who can save your daughter's life in the next 48 hours. And I'm willing to do it, not because I want anything from you sexually or romantically, but because I want you in my life. I want to know what it feels like to be near someone who loves that fiercely. Naledi closes her eyes. She thinks about Zara's thin face in the hospital bed. She thinks about the doctor's prepared sympathy. She thinks about 2 weeks. She thinks about burying her daughter in the red clay of the Johannesburg cemetery. She thinks about the words end-of-life care, and the way they sounded like a death sentence. If I refuse, she asks, your daughter gets an appointment with a grief counselor and a small funeral, he says simply. His voice is almost kind, almost compassionate. Both of those qualities make it more terrifying. If you accept, she gets to be 17, 25. Maybe she falls in love, has children, saves animals like she dreams about. Maybe she becomes someone extraordinary. And if I try to betray you? Naledi asks. If I go to the police? Then I disappear, he says. And your daughter's new kidney stops functioning. Organ rejection is a strange thing. Sometimes it just happens. Especially if the donor's emotional state becomes unstable. Especially if someone very important to me decides to put her in harm's way. Naledi understands. He's not just offering to save her daughter. He's threatening to ensure her daughter dies if Naledi doesn't cooperate. It's the kindest threat she's ever heard. It's also the most effective. I'll need it in writing, she says. Everything. No surprises. No hidden clauses. Every detail of what I'm agreeing to, what you're promising, what happens if one of us breaks the terms. For the first time, Min-jun smiles. It's a real smile, not the polished expression he wears in public. You drive a hard bargain, he says. I like that. It means you understand that this is a transaction, not a fairy tale, not a rescue, a trade. Yes, Naledi says. A trade. Already being prepared, he says. You'll sign the contract before Zara's surgery. Everything will be formal, everything legal. You'll be employed by one of my companies, completely legitimate. Nothing illegal, nothing immoral. But you'll be on call, available, useful. The word useful hangs in the air between them like a knife. They drive in silence for a long time. Naledi watches the landscape change from urban to rural, from Gauteng to the Free State. She watches the sun rise fully, painting the sky colors that should be beautiful, but just look like the end of something. The end of her old life. The end of her freedom. The end of being a woman with simple problems and simple solutions. There's one more thing, Min-jun says as they approach Cape Town's airspace. When this is over, when the 10 years are finished, you'll be free. Completely free. I'll ensure your daughter's medical care for life, but you can walk away from me. You can take her and disappear. I won't follow. I won't hunt you. The contract will be voided entirely. Naledi looks at him. You're saying you'll let me go. I'm saying, he replies, that I want you to stay by choice, not by force. That when the debt is paid, I want you to decide that you want to be near me. That's the only way I'll ever believe that you actually care. It's a cruel thing to say, because it makes her understand that he's not just buying her time and labor. He's buying her eventual affection. He's betting that 10 years of proximity, of partnership, of understanding will transform her from an employee into something more. And the worst part is she's not sure he's wrong. Naledi has just made a deal that will change her entire life. She traded her freedom for her daughter's life. Tell us, sign the contract or run now. Because in the next chapter, she's going to discover exactly what kind of man she's bound herself to, and what working for him actually means. Hit subscribe bell if you want to know if love is possible in a cage made of debt and desperation. The private hospital is in Cape Town. 5 stars, discretion guaranteed. The kind of place where wealthy people come when they need things the public healthcare system can't provide. It's the kind of hospital where a single room costs more per day than Naledi makes in a month. It's the kind of hospital where people don't ask questions about where organs come from or how a patient got a surgery scheduled in 48 hours instead of 18 months. The moment they arrive, a medical team materializes. A doctor named Dr. Kumalo takes Zara through a series of tests. Her hands are gentle with the 7-year-old, her voice kind, her manner professional in the way that puts both mother and child at ease. Your daughter is otherwise healthy, Dr. Kumalo explains to Naledi later, in a private consultation room that smells like expensive flowers and anxiety. The kidney disease is isolated. This transplant should be very successful. How did you get a kidney? Naledi asks. She doesn't want to know. But she needs to know. Mr. Park arranged it, Dr. Kumalo says carefully. The donor is a young man, early 20s, living kidney donation. He was well compensated and well screened. The match is excellent, almost as good as if it came from a family member. Almost. Naledi hears the qualifier. She imagines a young man, desperate for money, selling part of himself to save a stranger's child. She imagines the desperation that would drive someone to that decision. She imagines that she's now bound to someone through a chain of desperation and despair that extends far beyond just her and Min-jun. That night, she lies in a hospital bed next to Zara's, listening to her daughter sleep, understanding that nothing will ever be the same. She has 12 hours until surgery, 12 hours before she signs contracts that bind her to a man she doesn't fully understand, 12 hours before she trades the only thing she has left, her freedom, for the only thing that matters, her daughter's life. No, this can't be happening, she thinks. But it is. And you're going to let it. She thinks about her mother. Montamba Futhi is watching Zara's empty bed right now, understanding that something has shifted, that her granddaughter is gone and her daughter has disappeared without explanation. Naledi will have to call her. She will have to lie. She will have to say that there's been an opportunity, a private doctor, a chance at the transplant they've been praying for. She will have to not mention the man with the cold eyes or the contracts waiting to be signed. At 5:47 a.m., Min-jun appears in surgical scrubs. The sight of him in medical garb is jarring. He looks almost legitimate, almost like someone who could be trusted, almost like someone who saves lives instead of orchestrating desperation. You're a donor? Naledi asks, confused. No, he says. But I need to be present. The surgeon works for me. The kidney comes from a source I've secured. Everything will be monitored to ensure it takes. Where did you get it? She asks. She's asking this question as if it matters, as if the answer will change anything. It won't. Zara's surgery is happening in 3 hours. The kidney is already being prepared. The only question left is whether Naledi is brave enough to sign the contracts that Min-jun has brought. He hands her a folder. Inside are documents, contracts written in legal language that makes her head spin. Ownership, obligation, loyalty, confidentiality. The papers essentially transfer her from the category of free person to the category of employed asset. She reads them 3 times, understanding more with each pass. She will be paid $8,000 per month, a fortune by her standards, insulting by his. She will be available 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, whenever Min-jun requires her services. She will not discuss her work with anyone. She will not go to law enforcement. She will not attempt to leave Johannesburg without permission. She will not risk Min-jun's business interests. And if she violates any of these terms, Zara's medical care will be discontinued. At the bottom of the contract is a signature line and the date. Today. You're not forcing me, Min-jun says quietly. He's standing by the window, looking out at Cape Town's morning. I could, but I'm not. I want you to choose this. I want you to understand what you're agreeing to and choose it anyway. Because you love your daughter more than you love your freedom. Naledi picks up the pen. Her hand shakes. She signs her name on the line, and she feels something die inside her. Not her love for her daughter. That's eternal, absolute, unchangeable. What dies is her naivety. Her belief that she could ever exist outside of power structures. Her faith that the world is inherently fair. She becomes Min-jun's employee at 6:23 a.m. Zara is wheeled into surgery at 6 a.m. The surgery takes 4 hours. Naledi sits in a waiting room the size of a small apartment, furnished with chairs that probably cost more than she made in a year. Unable to read, unable to think, unable to do anything but wait. She thinks about the young man who donated his kidney. She thinks about whether he understood what he was part of. She thinks about whether her daughter's life is worth the exploitation of someone else. Yes, she thinks. Yes, it is. My daughter's life is worth anything. And she feels sick at the certainty of that thought. At 10:47 a.m., Dr. Kumalo emerges, still in surgical gear, still masked. The surgery was successful, she says, pulling down her mask. The kidney is functioning beautifully. In fact, I've never seen a donor kidney integrate this quickly. Your daughter will have an excellent prognosis. She looks at Min-jun before she looks at Naledi, and Naledi understands the chain of command. Dr. Kumalo works for Min-jun. Everyone in this hospital works for Min-jun. Naledi now works for Min-jun. She has traded herself for her daughter's life. Zara wakes up groggy and confused, still under the effects of anesthesia, not fully understanding what's happened to her. But her blood work is perfect. The kidney is already working, already filtering, already giving her life back. Naledi holds her daughter's hand and cries. Not from joy. From the weight of what she's done. That evening when Zara is sleeping, Min-jun sits across from her in the hospital room. Your mother called, he says. 4 times. I had one of my people tell her that you found a private surgeon who was willing to take the case. I told her you'll call her tomorrow with details. Thank you, Naledi says. Don't thank me yet, he replies. The contract is only beginning. You have 10 years to understand what you've agreed to. Naledi has just signed away 10 years of her life to save her daughter. But the question now is, what will those 10 years cost her? Tell us in the comments. She made the right choice or she made a terrible mistake. Because in the next chapter, her new life begins, and nothing will ever be simple again. Hit subscribe bell because you need to see what happens when a desperate mother enters a dangerous man's world. They return to Johannesburg 1 week later on a private plane. Zara recovers with the speed of a young body given a second chance. Within days she's asking for books, asking for her schoolwork, asking when she can go back to school. Within 2 weeks, she's running in the hospital courtyard. Her new kidney working so perfectly that she outpaces nurses half her age. Naledi watches her daughter flourish and understands that she made the right choice. This is what Zara deserves. Life, movement, the possibility of a future. A future where she doesn't spend 6 hours 3 times a week hooked up to machines. A future where she can play soccer. A future where she can dream about being a veterinarian without the shadow of death hanging over her. But the cost of that future is becoming clearer every day. The apartment Min-jun has arranged for them is in Santon, in a building with security and a lobby attendant and air conditioning that actually works. It's a 3-bedroom place with furniture that matches and a kitchen with modern appliances. It's beautiful. It's also a cage. On the first night in the new apartment, Naledi receives a phone call. Tomorrow morning 8 a.m., Min-jun's voice says. You'll report to the Park Industries office. You'll meet with HR. You'll be officially on board as a consultant. Bring your ID and your contact information. I thought, Naledi starts. You thought you'd have time to settle in, he finishes. You do. You have 1 night. Tomorrow your new life begins. He hangs up. Naledi sits in the darkness of this beautiful apartment that isn't hers, in a city that suddenly feels smaller and more dangerous, and understands the true cost of the trade she's made. It's not just her freedom. It's her time, her energy, her ability to just be a mother and nothing else. She calls her mother. Montambafuthi listens to the explanation, private doctor, special medical arrangement, new job, better pay, without interrupting. Naledi, her mother says finally, what have you done? Saved your granddaughter's life. Naledi replies. At what cost? Her mother asks. Naledi doesn't answer because she doesn't know yet. Montambafuthi visits the apartment 3 days later. She brings food, pap and morogo, traditional Sotho dishes that taste like home and safety. She holds Zara and cries happy tears at how healthy her granddaughter looks. She examines the apartment with the eye of someone who's learned to identify danger and luxury. This is too much, Montambafuthi says finally, sitting in the kitchen, a cup of rooibos tea in her weathered hands. A man doesn't do this unless he wants something. He wants me to work for him, Naledi says carefully. What kind of work? Her mother asks. Consulting. Administrative work. Translation. Montambafuthi studies her daughter's face. She's a nurse. She's learned to read the signs of pain and deception and fear. She sees all three in her daughter now. Does Zara know? Her mother asks. Know what? That her mother has sold herself to a stranger. The words are harsh, but Naledi doesn't argue because they're true. I didn't sell myself, Naledi says. I bought her life. Same thing, Montambafuthi replies. She sets down her tea and reaches across the table to take her daughter's hand. Listen to me, child. I survived being a single mother because I had my pride. I worked every hour God gave me, but I never compromised who I was. I never let a man own me because my daughter deserved to see her mother as a whole person. She squeezes Naledi's hand. Now you have a daughter. And she will grow up understanding that her mother thought her life was worth less than her freedom. That might be true. That might be necessary. But she will know it. And it will change how she sees you. Naledi pulls her hand away. My daughter will grow up alive. That's what matters. Your daughter will grow up with a mother who's broken, Montambafuthi says. That matters too. Montambafuthi leaves an hour later, but her words stay with Naledi like a stain she can't wash out. Naledi's own mother is telling her she's made a mistake, but Naledi doesn't regret saving her daughter. Tell us in the comments, mother is right or Naledi is right? Because this is the moment Naledi starts to question everything. When Min-jun calls, Naledi is expecting it. She's been waiting for it. She's been dreading it. I need you at the Santon Sun Hotel tomorrow night, he says. There's no preamble, no greeting. Just a directive. There's a gala. You'll wear the dress I'm having sent to you. You'll accompany me. You'll introduce yourself as a consultant for my company. I'm not a consultant, Naledi says, though she knows this argument is already lost. You will be, he replies. As of today, you're officially employed by Park Industries in a consulting capacity. It's completely legitimate. You'll even be paid $8,000 a month as promised. Consider it the first installment of saving your daughter's life. The money arrives in her account within the hour. $8,000. She stares at the number on her phone screen, understanding that this is how he owns her. Not through violence. Through making it impossible to refuse. Through giving her the kind of financial security she's never had, then making that security conditional on her cooperation. She looks at the payment. $8,000. That's almost what she made in 6 months at the hospital. For one night at a gala. The dress arrives in a box that smells like expensive leather and imported silk. It's emerald green, perfectly fitted to her frame, which means he's had her body measured, her dimensions recorded, her physical form catalogued in some system she doesn't understand. With it comes diamonds, earrings that catch light like trapped stars, and shoes that cost more than her entire old wardrobe. She stands in front of the mirror in her new apartment and sees a stranger. The woman looking back at her is polished, sophisticated, wealthy. She's someone important. She's someone who belongs at galas. Someone who belongs in Min-jun's world. She's not herself anymore. She leaves Zara with a babysitter Min-jun has arranged. A kind woman named Grace who has impeccable references and appears at the apartment with a background check that's already been completed. The gala is in a ballroom that glitters with wealth and power. Naledi clings to Min-jun's arm, terrified she'll do something wrong. Say something stupid. Reveal herself as the hospital cleaner she actually is. Her heart pounds. Her palms sweat. She feels like an imposter, like someone playing dress-up in a world where everyone else actually belongs. But Min-jun keeps his hand on the small of her back, keeps her close, and suddenly she's someone important. Someone worth noticing. Someone valued. "This is Naledi," he tells a group of powerful men. CEOs, government officials, people whose names she recognizes from the news. "She's my new strategic advisor. She has an excellent mind for understanding complex situations." He's lying. She knows it. They probably know it. But the lie is so smoothly delivered, so confidently stated, that it becomes a kind of truth. If Min-jun says she's valuable, then she becomes valuable. If he says she's intelligent, then she becomes intelligent. Power is contagious. She watches how he moves through the room, how men defer to him, how women touch his arm and feel permitted to smile, how his presence seems to darken the space around him in a way that's both terrifying and magnetic. She also notices the other people watching him, men with careful expressions, women with calculating eyes, predators recognizing a predator. Later in the evening, a man approaches her. He's older, maybe 60, with the kind of smile that has practiced being charming. His accent is American. His cologne is overwhelming. "So you're the woman Park brought," he says. He's had several drinks. His confidence is loosening into something closer to rudeness. "What are you getting out of this?" Naledi's heart hammers. This is a test. She understands it immediately. In Min-jun's world, everything is a test. "I'm not sure what you mean," she says carefully. "Everyone gets something," he says. He leans closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Money. Protection. Access. What's your currency?" "Life," she thinks. "My daughter's life. I'm just here to support my employer," she says instead. The man laughs, but it's not kind. It's predatory. "You're sleeping with him. That's the only reason he'd bring a woman who looks like she just walked off a hospital floor." The insult lands like a slap. She hears the judgment in his voice. She understands that to him, she's a charity case, a poor woman elevated temporarily by proximity to power. She's a temporary accessory, like an expensive watch or a fast car. "Actually," Min-jun says quietly, appearing beside her. His presence is suddenly dangerous. The light in the ballroom seems to darken around him. The man's smile fades. "Naledi is here because she's smarter than most of the people in this room. And because she has something I value. Loyalty." The man backs away immediately. Not just backing away, but retreating, his smile disappearing, his confidence evaporating. He vanishes into the crowd, looking for easier prey. Min-jun's hand on the small of Naledi's back is almost gentle. "You handled that well," he says quietly. "You didn't react. You didn't show fear. You didn't try to defend yourself. You just waited. Waited for me to intercede." "I was terrified," Naledi admits. "That's what made it effective," he says. "Fear is honesty. People can smell confidence that's pretended. They can sense authenticity and terror." In the car on the way home, Naledi is shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of what she's becoming. She understands that she just had a lesson in Min-jun's world, and she understands that she passed. "Is that what I am to you?" she asks. "Insurance? A symbol of something you can control." "You're a woman," Min-jun says quietly, "who sacrificed her freedom for her daughter. That makes you the most powerful person I know. The rest is just performance." Naledi is beginning to understand Min-jun's world. She's beginning to see how power works in his circles. Tell us, she's getting stronger or she's getting in deeper? Hit subscribe bell because the next chapters show how she transforms from victim to something far more dangerous. 3 months into the contract, Naledi understands that Min-jun isn't just a businessman. He's something more dangerous. Men fear him. Women defer to him. He moves through the city like a ghost, present everywhere, seen nowhere. She starts attending his meetings. She translates documents from Korean to English. She listens to conversations about operations, networks, movements of money and power that she doesn't fully understand but recognizes as illegal. But she's also beginning to understand what he actually does. She hears him discussing the dismantling of trafficking networks. She hears him talk about taking down drug lords. She hears him describe shutting down operations that exploit children. One evening, she's in his office when a report comes across his desk. It details a human trafficking ring operating out of Hillbrow. 12-year-old girls. 12-year-old boys. Sold to men across South Africa. Across the continent. The report has names, locations, bank accounts. Min-jun reads it quietly. Then he makes a phone call. Move on Hill, bro, he says simply. I want the operation shut down by Friday. The girls go to safe houses. The boys to the government facility. The men. He pauses. The men will receive appropriate consequences. He hangs up. Naledi realizes. She's working for a vigilante. A man who operates outside the law because the law moves too slowly. A man who's decided that justice needs to be meted out by people like him. She should be horrified. Instead, she's beginning to see the logic in it. Maybe he's not a villain, she thinks. Maybe he's something more complicated. Then the threat comes. Naledi is picking up Zara from school when a black SUV pulls up beside them. The window rolls down, and a man with cold eyes looks at her. Your daughter is very precious, he says. His voice is casual, conversational, which makes it more terrifying. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Tell Park Min-jun that he's overstepped. Tell him we're going to take what's his. Zara grabs Naledi's hand so tightly it hurts. Mama. Naledi doesn't think. She opens the car door and pulls her daughter inside, locking it, driving away at speeds that would get her arrested under normal circumstances. When she gets to Min-jun's office, she's shaking with rage and fear. They threatened Zara, she says. They threatened my daughter because of you. Min-jun's face goes absolutely still. It's the first time she's seen him lose his composure. It's terrifying. What did they look like? He asks. She describes them. His expression doesn't change, but she sees his hands tighten into fists. She sees the moment he decides that someone is going to suffer for this. You're moving, he says. Tonight. I have a house in the northern suburbs. Private, secure, protected. You and Zara will stay there. I'm not going into a cage, Naledi says. The words come out before she can stop them. She surprised herself with her own courage. I agreed to work for you. I didn't agree to be a prisoner. You don't have a choice, he says. My enemies know about your daughter now. They will use her. They will hurt her. The only way to keep her safe is to remove her from circulation. Then teach me, Naledi says. Teach me to fight them the way you fight them. Don't lock me away. Make me useful. Min-jun studies her for a long moment. His dark eyes bore into hers. She sees him evaluating her, recalibrating his understanding of who she is. You understand that learning what I know means you can never truly leave, he says finally. You'll have information that people will kill for. I already can't leave, Naledi replies. My daughter's life depends on your goodwill. Might as well make myself valuable enough that you keep us both alive. He smiles then, a real smile, not the polished expression he wears in public. It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time. You're remarkable, he says. I'm desperate, she corrects. There's a difference. The house is in Houghton, behind walls and security cameras and armed guards. It's even more beautiful than the apartment, but Naledi understands immediately that it's not beautiful. It's a fortress. A woman named Mrs. Song works there. Housekeeper, cook, security consultant. She's Korean, maybe 70, with the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from decades of serving powerful men. She teaches Naledi how to move through the house safely, how to identify surveillance, how to recognize when someone is following. In this world, Mrs. Song tells her, paranoia is wisdom. Fear keeps you alive. Zara adjusts quickly. Children are resilient. She has her own bathroom and a bedroom with toys Min-jun's people have selected carefully. She has a tutor who comes 3 times a week. She has a life that, to her, is simply normal. But Naledi feels the cage. She feels it in the security protocols. She feels it in the guards who appear whenever she leaves the property. She feels it in the way her phone is monitored, her location tracked, her movements recorded. She is owned. Not through locks and chains. Through love for her daughter and fear of losing her. One evening, Min-jun comes to the house. He brings documents. I'm formally adopting Zara, he says without preamble. Making myself her guardian alongside you. It's not a takeover. It's a protection. If anything happens to you, I'm legally responsible for her. Her medical care, her education, her future. Naledi's first instinct is to refuse. But she understands the logic. If something happens to her, Zara needs to be protected. And Min-jun is the only one with the resources to do that. Why? She asks. Because I lost someone I should have protected, he replies. I won't make that mistake again. Min-jun is tying himself to Naledi's daughter. He's making Zara his legal responsibility. Hit subscribe bell because the next chapters show how entanglement becomes love. Over the next 3 months, Naledi learns a world most people never know exists. Min-jun brings in trainers. A man named Carlos teaches her hand-to-hand combat. A woman named Elena teaches her to identify surveillance and counter-surveillance. A man named David teaches her about networks, about how information moves through a city, about the digital underbelly that most people never see. She learns how to identify surveillance. She learns how to move through a city without being seen. She learns how to translate not just languages but intentions, understanding what people want beneath what they're saying. More importantly, she learns who Min-jun really is. He's not a drug lord. He doesn't traffic humans or weapons. He doesn't extort businesses or run gambling operations. Instead, he uses his network, built over decades, through careful cultivation of relationships and ruthless elimination of competition, to dismantle criminal operations. He works with law enforcement, not officially but effectively. He gathers intelligence that the police can't access. He takes down networks that official channels move too slowly to reach. He's a vigilante, and Naledi, in working for him, has become complicit in extrajudicial violence. She knows this. She sees the evidence. She reviews the reports. She sees the operations he targets and understands that every single one is directed at people who prey on the powerless. Traffickers, drug dealers who sell to children, men who exploit sex workers. She's becoming an instrument of his justice. Why do you do this? She asks him one night. They're in his office and he's reviewing reports about an operation he's planning. Something involving human trafficking, though she tries not to know the details. Because the legal system fails, he says simply. Because justice comes too late. Because children die while we wait for paperwork to process. He looks at her. When my wife was pregnant, I thought about what kind of world I wanted to bring a child into. I thought about the violence, the trafficking, the suffering, and I realized that the legal system moves too slowly. That official justice is a myth that rich people tell themselves to sleep at night. He pauses and she sees something shift in his expression. Pain. Real raw pain. So I started fixing things myself. And I became someone capable of great violence. And I thought I could never have children again, because I'd become someone unfit to raise them. He looks at her with an intensity that makes her breath catch. Then you came into my life. And you showed me that people don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love. They need to be willing to sacrifice. Naledi closes her eyes. She thinks about the operations Min-jun has dismantled. When she learns that one of them was a human trafficking ring selling children, she finds herself unable to maintain her moral outrage. When she learns that another target was a drug operation that was distributing fentanyl to schoolchildren, she feels something that looks dangerously like pride. This is how they own you, she realizes. Not through force. Through making you believe the violence is justified. But maybe the violence is justified. Maybe in a world where the system fails, private justice is the only justice that matters. One evening, Naledi reviews files on an operation Min-jun is planning. The files document a man named Sibusiso Ndlovu, 42 years old, runs a brothel in Yeovil where underage girls are kept drugged and exploited. The files include photographs. The girls are young. Some are younger than Zara. All of them look dead inside. There's a plan document. Min-jun's people will raid the location. The girls will be rescued. The men will be arrested. But there's another section. Contingencies. What happens if Sibusiso runs? What happens if he resists? What happens if official channels fail? That's where it gets dark. He'll be disappeared. Elena, one of the trainers, tells Naledi matter-of-factly. No trial. No legal process. Mr. Park's people will make sure he can't ever hurt another child. That's the reality of this world. Sometimes justice requires sacrifice. Naledi should be horrified. She should refuse to participate. She should walk away. Instead, she asks, how long will he disappear? Permanently, Elena says. And Naledi finds she doesn't care. She finds she can't muster outrage for a man who's destroying children. She finds that she's becoming comfortable with murder if it prevents other murders. This is the moment she understands. She's not Min-jun's victim anymore. She's his partner. And she's capable of things she never thought she would be capable of. It happens on a Tuesday night. Min-jun is meeting with federal agents. One of his operations has yielded enough intelligence to dismantle a major trafficking ring. The meeting is supposed to be secure, in a location known only to a handful of people. But someone talks. Naledi gets the call at 11:47 p.m. There's been an incident, a woman's voice says. Mr. Park has been shot. You need to come to Mill Park Hospital immediately. The drive feels eternal. Naledi's mind spirals through catastrophes. What if he dies? What if she loses him? The question shocks her because she hasn't admitted to herself until this moment that he matters. That he's become something more than her employer. Something more than the man who bought her daughter's life. No, this can't be happening, she thinks. Not now. Not when. When what? When she was starting to care about him. When she was beginning to see him not as a criminal but as a broken man trying to fix a broken world. He's in surgery when she arrives. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, the ER doctor explains. Severe bleeding. They've managed to stabilize him but can't promise anything yet. Naledi sits in the waiting room and realizes something that terrifies her. She's in love with him. Not because he saved her daughter. Not because he gave her money or protection or a new life. But because he's willing to bleed for people he's never met. Because he's broken and beautiful and absolutely, impossibly committed to making the world slightly less cruel. She calls her mother. I need you to keep Zara for a few days, she says. There's been an emergency. What kind of emergency? Montambafuthi asks sharply. The kind where I might lose the man I love, Naledi says. And the words shock her because she hasn't known they were true until she said them. When Min-jun comes out of surgery, the first thing he does, before he's even fully conscious, is ask about Zara. She's safe, Naledi assures him. She's with my mother. She's fine. Good, he murmurs and goes back to sleep. Min-jun wakes up on the third day after surgery. He's pale, diminished by pain and medication, but his eyes are clear when he looks at Naledi sitting beside his bed. How long have you been here? He asks. Since you came out of surgery, she says. He studies her face. You look exhausted. I couldn't leave, she says. Something shifts in his expression, recognition perhaps, of something he's been afraid to acknowledge. I need to tell you something, he says. Something I should have told you months ago. He pulls a folder from his bedside table. Inside are photographs. Dozens of photographs. Naledi in her apartment. Naledi picking up Zara from school. Naledi at the market in her neighborhood walking through the city. Surveillance photographs. Years of them. I've been watching you, he says. For almost a year. Before your daughter got sick. Before I approached you. Naledi's blood turns to ice. She wants to scream. She wants to hit him. She wants to destroy him. Why? She asks instead. Because I was looking for someone, he says. Someone who couldn't be bought. Someone whose loyalty couldn't be compromised, because she had only one thing in the world she cared about. Someone willing to sacrifice everything for that one person. He pauses and she understands what he's about to say before he says it. I wanted to understand that kind of love. My wife was going to give me that understanding. But she died. And I've spent 8 years trying to understand how to love that fiercely and I couldn't. Until I met you. You're saying you orchestrated this, Naledi says slowly. You watched me until my daughter got sick. And then you inserted yourself into my life. I didn't make her sick, he says immediately. But I did create the conditions where you would need me. I had people watching her kidney function, monitoring for any decline. I had people positioned at the hospital to ensure the progression was documented properly. He pauses. I created a crisis and positioned myself as the only solution. No, this can't be true, Naledi thinks. That would mean everything. Her life is real, he says, reading her face. Her recovery is real. The kidney works perfectly. But the path to needing it? I accelerated that. I made sure you would be desperate enough to accept my terms. Naledi stands up. She wants to scream at him. She wants to walk away. She wants to do 100 things that would demonstrate her fury, her betrayal, her sense of violation. But instead she realizes something. It doesn't matter anymore. Her daughter is alive. Her daughter is healthy. The means have already been paid for in her freedom, and she can't undo that now. The question isn't whether she was manipulated. The question is what happens next. Why tell me, she asks. Because I was shot, he says. Because I nearly died. And because when I thought I was going to die, the only thing I regretted was that I'd lied to you. I want you to know the truth. I want you to decide, knowing everything, whether you stay or go. She could leave. She should leave. She should take her daughter and disappear and build a life away from this man who manipulated her from the start. Instead, she asks, why do you actually do this? The vigilante work? Not the story about understanding love. The real reason. He's quiet for a long time. When my wife was pregnant, I thought about what kind of world I wanted to bring a child into. I thought about the violence, the trafficking, the suffering, and I realized that the legal system moves too slowly. Justice comes too late. Children die while we wait for paperwork to process. He looks at her. So I started fixing things myself. And I became someone capable of great violence. And I thought I could never have children again, because I'd become someone unfit to raise them. He pauses. Then you came into my life. And you showed me that people don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love. They need to be willing to sacrifice. Naledi closes her eyes. She thinks about her daughter. She thinks about all the children Min-jun has saved through his vigilante work. She thinks about the line between hero and villain, and how it's thinner than she ever imagined. She thinks about the fact that she's become complicit in violence, and she's not sure she regrets it. She thinks about her mother's words. Your daughter will grow up with a mother who's broken. Maybe that's true. Maybe she is broken. Maybe breaking yourself to save someone is the only real kind of strength. I'm staying, she says. Not because of what you did. Not because of the manipulation. I'm staying because you're right. Love isn't about being pure. It's about being willing to bleed for someone. And I'm willing to do that. For Zara. And for you. He reaches out and takes her hand. I love you, he says. I think I've loved you since the moment I first saw you. A woman so desperate to save her daughter that she would sacrifice everything. That kind of love is rare. And I wanted it near me. I love you too, she says. Which might mean I'm insane. But I do. Naledi has just admitted she loves the man who manipulated her. A man who's dangerous, who's criminal, who orchestrated the crisis that made her vulnerable to him. Tell us. She's crazy or she's the bravest woman alive. And add your country. Because those might be the same thing. Hit subscribe bell because this story is about to end in a way you'll never expect. 6 months later, Min-jun is fully recovered. The federal operation he was conducting when he was shot has successfully dismantled a major trafficking network. 23 people arrested. 57 children rescued. 112 women freed from forced prostitution. The statistics are bloodless, but they represent real lives, children who get to grow up instead of being sold as commodities. Naledi knows all of this because she's part of his operation now. She's not just his employee or his lover. She's his partner. She translates, she strategizes. She becomes his voice in rooms where his accent would make him stand out. She has access to information that could destroy him. She could go to law enforcement right now and end everything. She doesn't. She's become someone else entirely. One evening, Min-jun takes her to a restaurant overlooking the city. The sunset paints Johannesburg in shades of gold and crimson. He orders her favorite wine, a South African red, because he's learned her tastes, learned who she is beneath the cover stories and the performance. I have 2 things to ask you, he says. The first is a document. Adoption papers. Legal documentation making him Zara's official guardian alongside Naledi. Not replacing Naledi, not taking away her authority, but binding them together, making Zara his daughter as well as her own. I promised you that I would never let her disappear, he says. This makes it official. Legally, permanently, irreversibly. She's mine to protect. Naledi cries. She's learned to do that now, to feel deeply without shame. There's something else, Min-jun says. He hands her another envelope. An acceptance letter from the University of Johannesburg. A full scholarship. A master's degree program in public health. You're going back to school, he says. I don't care how long it takes. You're going to finish your dreams, because you never should have had to sacrifice them in the first place. Naledi stares at the letter, unable to speak. I've created a monster, he continues quietly. I've turned you into something that your mother was right to fear. And the only way I can live with that is by giving you back some of what you lost. He pulls out a ring. Simple, elegant. A single diamond that catches the light like all the hope in the world. Marry me, he says. Not as a contract. As a choice. And Naledi says yes, understanding fully that she's choosing to stay in the cage, choosing to bind herself to this man, choosing a life that exists in shadows and moral ambiguity. But she's also choosing to love someone who loves her enough to bleed for her. The wedding is small. Just family. Zara is a flower girl, scattering petals down an aisle in a garden that overlooks the city. Montambafuthi cries happy tears and tells everyone she'd known all along that Naledi would find her person. Though her eyes tell a different story. A story of a mother watching her daughter disappear into a world she doesn't understand. They honeymoon in Cape Town. Zara comes with them. The three of them walk along the beach and Zara asks Min-jun to teach her Korean. And he laughs and says she's already smarter than he was at her age. The transplant is holding perfectly. Zara's blood work is excellent. The doctors say she could have a normal life expectancy. A normal childhood, normal dreams. Everything Naledi had sacrificed for. But sacrifice, she's learned, isn't a mathematical equation. You don't give up something and expect to receive equivalent value in return. You give it up and then somehow miraculously you receive something you never knew you needed. She has Min-jun. She has her daughter. She has a life she would never have dreamed possible. On their first anniversary, Min-jun takes her to a restaurant overlooking the city again. He gives her an envelope. Inside are documents. A job offer. A position with an international human rights organization, working to dismantle trafficking networks. It's legitimate work. It's public. It's the kind of work that doesn't require her to hide. You don't have to work for me anymore, he says. The contract is void. You're free. Naledi stares at the documents. What about us? We continue, he says. But as equals. Not as owner and owned. Not as manipulator and manipulated. As partners. She looks at the ring on her finger. She thinks about the journey that brought her here. Desperation, deception, danger, and somehow against all odds love. I want to work with you, she says. Not for you. With you. Equally. He smiles. I was hoping you'd say that. 1 year after the wedding, Naledi is working with an international organization during the day. She's pursuing her master's degree in the evenings. She's a wife. She's a mother. She's building a life that, on the surface, looks legitimate. But underneath, she's still Min-jun's partner in his vigilante operations. They've just completed a major operation taking down a pedophile ring. They're planning another, targeting a human trafficking operation in Durban. Her life has become a double life. By day, she's a human rights worker, legitimate and legal. By night, she's an instrument of extrajudicial justice. She's happy in a way she never thought possible. And she's terrified in a way that never fully goes away. One morning, she finds a photograph slipped under their gate. It shows Zara at school labeled with crosshairs. No threat written out. Just a reminder. She takes the photo to Min-jun. His face doesn't change, but she sees his hands tighten into fists. There's someone, he says quietly, from my past. Someone I thought I'd dealt with. Someone I should have killed when I had the chance. Who? Naledi asks, though she already knows the answer from the way he's holding his breath. She already knows from the way his voice goes flat. My brother, he says. And Naledi understands. The real story is just beginning. Naledi has found love in the darkest place. But now that darkness is closing in. Because Min-jun's past, the part he's been running from, the part he never told her about, is coming back. And his brother doesn't forgive. Tell us. She should run or she should fight, because part 2 is where this story becomes a war. Subscribe bell now because you won't want to miss it.